Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to be looking at the book of Baruch,
Yeah.
chapter 6 specifically.
Okay.
And we're going to be using the Agape Catholic Bible Study as our lens to look at this.
Very cool.
On the surface, this might seem like just some dusty old text about idol worship.
Uh-huh.
But trust me, there's some really surprising and relevant insights here for us in the 21st century.
It's amazing how this ancient text can still speak to us, about something so fundamental to the human experience. The things we place our faith in, the things we look to for security and meaning.
Yeah.
And so the book of Baruch, chapter 6, is actually a letter attributed to the prophet Jeremiah, written to the Israelites who were exiled in Babylon.
So immediately we're talking about people who are far from home, out of their element, stripped of their familiar rituals and structures. And I can only imagine how lost and vulnerable they must have felt.
And searching for something to hold on to, right? Some kind of stability in this new and unfamiliar place.
Yeah, for sure.
And of course, Babylon was a culture steeped in idol worship.
Right.
Everywhere they looked, there were these impressive statues representing all these different gods, promising protection, prosperity, all sorts of good things.
That would be pretty tempting, right?
Oh, yeah. Especially in their state of uncertainty.
Yeah.
It would have been very easy to get caught up in all of that.
Okay, so let's paint a picture for our listener.
Okay.
What were these Babylonian idols actually like?
Well, Baruch describes them in vivid detail.
Okay.
He talks about idols made of gold, silver wood.
Wow.
Just these elaborate creations, all decked out in purple robes, carried on shoulders.
Oh, wow.
In these grand processions.
Very visual, right.
Very visual, very much meant to inspire awe and devotion, project this image of power and authority.
But Jeremiah, speaking through this letter, doesn't hold back at all.
No, he doesn't.
He calls these idols out for what they really are.
Yeah.
Powerless, lifeless objects, unable to protect, provide, or even speak.
Can't even speak for themselves.
Yeah, and he uses satire to really drive this point home.
Oh, absolutely. He's a master of satire.
Yeah.
He describes these priests stealing from the idols.
What?
People having to dust them off. Even birds building nests on them.
Really?
Yeah, it's almost comical when you read it.
Yeah.
But through this humor, he's exposing the absurdity of placing your faith in something that can't even take care of itself.
That's so interesting, and that brings us to the heart of the matter.
Yes.
The Agape Catholic Bible Studies commentary on this passage, they emphasize that Jeremiah's message isn't just about those literal physical idols.
It's much deeper than that.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing this deeper human tendency to put our faith in things that ultimately can't really give us what we're looking for. That lasting fulfillment that we all crave.
And this is where it gets really interesting to me, because we've got this ancient story about idols in Babylon.
Yeah.
But the commentary suggests that this is something that we can really apply to our lives today.
In so many ways.
So what are some examples of these modern day idols that the Agape study identifies?
Well, they point to things like materialism. That endless pursuit of possessions and status symbols. That feeling that if I just had that bigger house, that fancier car, that designer handbag, then I'd finally be happy.
That's so relatable, right?
Just every lot.
Like, we're bombarded with these messages telling us that our worth is tied to what we own, what we wear.
It's all about the external, the image we project.
Yeah, and the commentary draws this direct parallel between those ancient Babylonians parading their idols through the streets and our modern obsession with displaying our possessions,
our achievements,
our perfect lives on social media.
It's all about validation, isn't it?
Yeah.
That same desire for security, for importance.
Okay, so materialism is one big one.
Definitely.
What other modern day idols does the Agape commentary warn us about?
There are a few more we'll unpack. They might surprise you.
Okay, this is already making me think twice about some of my own priorities.
That's the point.
Yeah.
But before we jump into those, I think it's important to understand why the Agape study puts so much emphasis on this whole concept of idolatry.
Right.
It's not just about avoiding certain things. It's about a deeper moral and spiritual orientation.
Okay, so before we dive into the specifics of those other modern day idols, let's explore that a bit.
Okay.
Why does the Agape Catholic Bible Study consider this such a crucial topic for us today, what are the deeper implications they're highlighting?
Well, let's get into that. Well, the Agape commentary really emphasizes the moral teachings that are embedded in this passage from Baruch.
Okay.
They see idol worship as a symptom of a deeper spiritual misalignment.
Right.
It's about losing sight of what's truly important and placing our trust in things that can't ultimately deliver on their promises.
So it's not just about avoiding certain behaviors, but it's about cultivating a certain way of being.
A way of being in the world.
In the world. Yeah. That makes sense.
Right. And that's where their emphasis on the moral implications comes in. They argue that when we chase after these idols, whether it's material possessions, status, or anything else, that we elevate to a place of ultimate importance.
Right.
We start to make decisions and take actions that are out of alignment with our deeper values.
Can you give an example of what that might look like?
Sure. Think about someone who's so focused on climbing the corporate ladder that they're willing to compromise their integrity, neglect their family, or even harm others to get ahead. They've essentially made career success their idol, and that's driving their behavior, even if it means sacrificing things that they know deep down are more important.
That's a pretty stark example.
It is.
But I can see how it fits into this framework of idolatry.
Yeah.
It's like that ambition has taken on a life of its own.
Right. It consumes them.
And it's dictating their choices.
Exactly. And the Agape commentary would argue that this kind of misalignment can lead to a whole host of problems, not just ethical dilemmas, but also a sense of inner emptiness, anxiety, even despair. Because when we place our faith in things that are ultimately fleeting and unreliable, we're setting ourselves up for disappointment.
It's like building a house on sand.
Exactly.
It might look impressive for a while.
Right.
But eventually that foundation's going to crumble.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
And the commentary uses this image of a spiritual desert to describe this state of being.
Interesting.
We're constantly searching for fulfillment, for something to quench our thirst. But the things we're reaching for are ultimately unsatisfying.
So we've talked about materialism as one of these modern-day idols.
Yes.
What are some of the others that the Agape study identifies?
Well, another one they highlight is technology.
Okay.
Now, they're not saying that technology itself is bad.
Right.
It can be a powerful tool for communication learning, connection.
For sure, for sure.
But the danger lies in becoming so dependent on our devices that we start to lose sight of what's real, what's truly important in life.
You mean like when we're constantly checking our phones, scrolling through social media, or glued to our screens? Even when we're with other people.
Even when we should be present in the real world with the people around us.
It's that sense of being tethered to these devices.
Yes.
Seeking validation and fulfillment.
Right.
Through likes and shares.
It's all virtual.
And online interactions.
And the commentary points out that this can lead to a kind of digital idolatry. Where we're placing more importance on our online persona than on our real-life relationships and experiences.
I think we've all experienced that to some degree.
I think so, too.
It's like we're chasing after this digital mirage, hoping it'll quench our thirst for connection.
Right.
But it often leaves us feeling even more empty and disconnected.
Exactly. It's a false promise.
Yeah.
And the commentary challenges us to ask ourselves some tough questions about our relationship with technology.
I like that.
Are we using it as a tool to enhance our lives? Or are we allowing it to control us?
Right.
To dictate our thoughts, emotions, behaviors?
So materialism technology, it sounds like these modern-day idols are all around us.
They are.
Are there any others
that
the Agape study warns about?
And this one might be the most challenging of all because it's so deeply ingrained in our culture.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
They suggest that in our individualistic society, one of the most pervasive idols is the self.
The self.
The self.
That's an interesting one.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have immediately thought of that as an idol.
It might seem counterintuitive at first, but think about it.
Okay.
We're constantly bombarded with messages telling us to follow our heart, to believe in ourselves, to prioritize our own desires and fulfillment above all else.
Yeah.
And while there's certainly value
in
self-love and self-care, the Agape commentary cautions against taking this too far.
So how does this idea of self-worship
Right.
fit into this whole concept of idolatry?
Good question.
It seems different from those other examples we've talked about.
Well, they argue that when we elevate ourselves to the center of the universe, when we make our own desires and needs the ultimate authority, we're essentially creating an idol out of ourselves.
Wow.
We become so focused on our own happiness, our own success, our own image, that we lose sight of the needs and perspectives of others.
Okay, I'm starting to see how that connects.
Yeah.
It's like we're building this little shrine to ourselves, and everyone else is just an extra in our personal drama.
And the commentary warns that this kind of self-centeredness can lead to a lot of suffering, both for ourselves and for those around us.
Right.
Because when we're constantly focused on getting what we want, on protecting our own ego, we become less capable of empathy, compassion, and genuine connection.
This is heavy stuff.
It is.
And so it made me think about how these seemingly harmless messages we encounter every day about self-love, self-care, putting ourselves first, can actually have a pretty dark side.
They can.
If they're not balanced with other values.
If they're taken to an extreme, that's a really insightful point.
Thanks.
And the Agape commentary emphasizes that the antidote to this kind of self-idolatry is humility.
About humility.
It's about recognizing that we're not the center of the universe, that our desires and needs are not always the most important thing.
So if we're trying to apply these insights to our own lives, how do we start to dust off these modern day idols?
That's the question, isn't it?
It feels like we're surrounded by them.
We are.
Yeah.
Well, the Agape commentary paints a somewhat bleak picture of dangers of idolatry, but they also offer some practical guidance on how to break free from these patterns and cultivate a more fulfilling way of being in the world.
Okay, so where do we even begin?
Let's explore that.
So we've been having this really intense conversation about, those modern day idols.
Yeah.
The things we tend to put on a pedestal.
Right.
And look to for fulfillment, often at the expense of what truly matters. And the Agape Catholic Bible Studies take on the book of Baruch has really been eye-opening, I think.
Yeah. It's amazing how this ancient warning about idol worship is still so relevant.
It's like holding a mirror up to our modern lives, isn't it?
Yeah, we might not be bowing down to golden statues, but we certainly have our own ways of chasing after empty promises.
Exactly. And you mentioned before that the Agape commentary doesn't just leave us with this warning.
They offer some guidance on how to break free.
So where do we even begin?
Well, the commentary emphasizes that it's not about becoming some kind of ascetic, rejecting everything the world has to offer.
It's more about shifting our focus.
Yes, exactly. Recognizing what truly nourishes our souls and aligning our actions with those deeper values.
So realignment rather than rejection.
I like that, yeah.
But how do we actually do that?
Well,
where do we start dusting off these modern day idols?
One practical suggestion the commentary offers is to cultivate a sense of detachment. And when it comes to materialism, this doesn't necessarily mean getting rid of all our possessions. It's more about changing our relationship with them.
So it's not about living like a minimalist.
Not necessarily.
But maybe being more mindful about what we buy.
Yes.
What we value and how we use our resources.
Precisely, the commentary encourages us to ask ourselves, do I own my possessions or do they own me?
Wow.
It's about recognizing when our desire for things has tipped over into an unhealthy obsession. When we're seeking our identity and worth in what we have rather than who we are.
That makes a lot of sense.
It's about checking ourselves, making sure we're not placing more importance on those external things than on our relationships, our values, our spiritual growth.
Exactly. And this idea of detachment.
Yes.
It applies to other areas as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Like when it comes to technology. The commentary suggests setting boundaries.
Boundaries are crucial.
Yeah, like putting away our phones during meals.
Yeah.
Creating tech-free zones in our homes.
Or scheduling those regular digital detoxes.
So it's about being more intentional.
Intentional, yes.
With our technology use. Making sure it's serving us.
It's a tool.
Rather than the other way around.
Not our master.
And what about those ideologies?
Ah, yes.
Those strongly held beliefs that we sometimes cling to
right.
so tightly that we just shut out any opposing viewpoints.
That can be a problem.
How do we approach those?
Well, the commentary emphasizes the importance of humility and open-mindedness.
Humility and open-mindedness.
It's about recognizing that we don't have all the answers.
Right.
That our perspective is limited.
For sure.
And that there's always more to learn.
So being willing to engage with different viewpoints.
Yes.
To challenge our own assumptions.
Exactly.
And to be open to the possibility that we might be wrong.
That's a tough one.
Those are tough questions.
They are.
But I can see how asking them could lead to some real growth.
Oh, absolutely.
And understanding.
It's all about growth.
Yeah.
And finally, we come to perhaps the most challenging idol of all.
Okay.
The self.
The self.
The Agape commentary suggests that true freedom comes from detaching even from our own ego.
Wow.
From that constant need to be right.
Right.
To be in control. To be the center of attention.
That sounds like a lifelong practice.
It is a practice.
But I can see how clinging to that sense of self-importance can create a lot of suffering.
For sure.
For ourselves and for the people around us.
Absolutely. And the commentary offers some practices that can help us cultivate this kind of humility.
Like what?
Things like mindfulness, gratitude, service to others.
It's like we're rewiring our brains.
Yes.
Retraining ourselves to find fulfillment in connection.
Exactly.
In compassion and contribution.
It's a beautiful thing.
Rather than in those fleeting things that we so often mistake for happiness.
You've captured it perfectly.
This has been a truly eye-opening exploration.
I agree.
You know, from ancient idols to modern-day temptations.
It's all connected.
We've uncovered some, I think, deep truths about the human condition and the things that we often mistake for happiness.
Right, those illusions.
And we've also been given some practical tools to help us dust off those idols.
To reorient ourselves.
And reorient our lives towards what truly nourishes our souls.
Matt, that's the goal.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope it sparked some insightful reflections for you and inspired you to live with greater intention and purpose.
Absolutely.
Until next time, keep seeking. Keep questioning.
And keep diving deep.
And keep diving deep.